Hello and welcome to the West Yorkshire Football Show. I'm Gareth Walker, and joining me tonight we've got Jason Mckeown from Width of a Post for a Bradford City special where we'll be discussing the season so far, Stefan Rupp's open letter, and our hopes for the rest of the season. If you're watching on YouTube, please give us a like and subscribe. If you're watching on Twitter, please give us a retweet. But we'll get into it. How are you, Jace?
Yeah, good. Yeah, how about yourself?
Yeah, not too bad. A bit of a headache going on tonight, so we will try and keep it on not for too long, but we'll see how we get on. Thanks for joining us for this. Right, we can't start the show without talking about last night's, really, because I haven't done a match review on last night, but I did read Tim's report on Width of the Post. Best performance of the season so far, Jace? Standards set for what we need to see for what's to come?
Yeah, I thought I was really encouraged by what I saw last night. I thought it was a very good performance, especially in the second half. I thought we really took control of that game. We obviously started the game really well. Then Stockport came back into it. We gave away two pretty poor goals, really. And at that point, you're thinking, here we go again, probably going to lose this game. But really good resilience in the second half, a really good performance. And I thought we were fully deserving of the victory. Obviously, there's a few caveats in that Stockport made a lot of changes. I think they only had two starters from their regular league games. So we do have to bear that in mind that it wasn't the strongest Stockport side, but equally it wasn't the strongest Bradford City side either. And we made changes too. They worked really well. I think the encouragement for me is that the 3-4-3 system that we've been trying since the weekend, again, it looked really good. Again, it was proved to be effective. And it was something that we tried last season under Mark Hughes at the start of the season, and it didn't really go very well. And one of the criticisms at the time was that Andy Cook wasn't suited to it because he wasn't a presser, and it didn't really work for that reason. So I think to see it last night, trying that formation again with Andy Cook up front and proving that he can do those things and that we can be effective that way, that is to me is very, very encouraging. So yeah, lots to like about last night. What did you make of it?
Yeah, pretty much the same, Jace, to be honest. I was a little bit... Yeah, I couldn't tell whether the comments were tongue-in-cheek previously about we're a better side without Andy Cook. It's a very, very difficult thing to agree with, isn't it? And I think last night kind of put a sock in those comments. I think it helped, like you said, that we had two people behind him who were doing a lot of the pressing for him. And because obviously you don't associate him with the pressing stats that you would with a Kavanagh or a Point. And I've been sort of talking previously about how I think it's a shame that we've not really played how we played at the end of last season in terms of lineup. I don't think the side, the midfield and the attack have been given the same chance that they were given at the end of last season. I don't think we've seen it. We know we started with Sarcevic and Patterson in midfield, and we took out Walker and Poynton. And even when Walker and Poynton have come back in, they've kind of been on the other side to where they were last season. Or they've not played with Kavanagh, or they've not played with Tyreek Wright, and it all sort of linked up really well last season. So I was disappointed. But the 3-4-3, like you say, we've moved sort of away from a 3-5-2 this last couple of games. It seems to have worked, and we built on Saturday, didn't we? Really at Crewe, which was, I know the weather was a leveler to a certain extent, but I thought we were good there, and probably the better side there, really, even though we were down to 10 men. So yeah, I think the standards have been set now, haven't they, for the rest of the season? We need to see more of that, really. Just coming on to like what we've seen so far this season, we're past a third of the way through now. How would you assess it so far? A little bit disappointed in what we've seen, or is it kind of understandable with the injuries and things that we've had?
I think it's probably a little bit disappointing, I would say. As you talked about before, the way we ended last season and that plan that we built, you're really looking forward to that to continue into this season. We strengthened in the summer. The squad, I think, looks a lot stronger. I think we did some pretty decent business in the summer, and I was quite confident coming into it. And the injuries have obviously been a real problem. You can't get away from that. Certain areas of the team have been absolutely decimated, and that's been a problem. But I think even when everyone has been fit, we haven't necessarily found the higher gears yet that we would expect to. We haven't necessarily put in a particularly dominant performance anywhere really, where we've looked absolutely on top of our game. And it's a little bit reminds me of Mark Hughes a couple of years ago, where we spent all season waiting for those higher gears to be found, and we never found them. So that's been a slight concern there. I think we've obviously had some problems, and perhaps unexpected, certainly up front, in terms of who would have thought at the start of the season that with the options we had, we'd end up getting to this point where there's only Andy Cook who's got a decent amount of league goals, and only Ola Sanderson's the only striker who's scored in the league so far this season, and that Kavanagh has had such a difficult time, and that's been a real problem. Tyler Smith, there was always a bit that could go 50-50 potentially. And Verdane Oliver, I think, has been a bit disappointed this season as well, in what is the last year of his contract. So there's been problems there. I think we've been worked out a little bit in some games. I think the Doncaster game, tactically, we were really caught out that day, and they did a job on us. And I think that's probably been a blueprint other managers have followed since then. And partly that is Richie Smallwood on his own in the centre midfield is someone you can crowd out there, and if you can do that, then you're in with a good chance, especially with some of the issues we've had going forward as well, and the selection problems we've had there. So that's been a problem, and I think it's encouraging moving to the 3-4-3. It's a recognition that up front it's not been working out as we'd like, and playing two up top is all well and good, but if one of your strikers isn't contributing enough and isn't doing what's needed to be, how long do you persist with that, and how long do you keep swapping strikers and hoping someone's going to finally get some form? And I think the central midfield problems as well of leaving Richard Smallwood on his own, moving to a 3-4-3 and bringing in a body alongside him in these two away games at least anyway, has provided better balance. And I think that's probably the way forward now to go with the three up top. Obviously a bit of a selection problem now because you've got Kavanagh scoring twice and you've got Jamie Walker to bring back in. But that's a nice problem to have. Defensively, players are now back as well. That looks stronger there. And I think there are some encouraging signs. But obviously a long way to go, I think, really. What do you reckon?
Yeah, pretty much agree. I've been really disappointed that Kavanagh's struggled to sort of live up to what he set the standards he set last season. I think he picked up an injury in pre-season, didn't he? And it clearly affected him. He wasn't fit when he came back into the side. And then I think Graham Alexander spoken last night after the game, and he spoke previously about how possibly was just trying a bit too hard to score a goal, and it was starting to get in his head. And he took him out of the team for a bit, and he said, like, we want you to do what you were doing last season and do the pressing and all the other work, and don't worry too much about the goal. You're chasing it. And that was why he took him out of the team, and he's brought him back in. And hopefully, well, I was really impressed with him on Saturday at Crewe. Obviously, he hit the post. He led the line really well to say he was playing on his own up front. And then last night, it looked more like the Callum Kavanagh that we saw at the end of last season, because I was quite, had high hopes for him at the end of last season. I thought he looked really good, a real foil for Cook. As you mentioned, the other strikers, Sanderson started well, but's really gone off the boil. Really gone off the boil. And then Tyler Smith, I've never been convinced by. Verdane Oliver never really looks suitable to be anything other than Andy Cook's backup for me. Obviously, last night, like you mentioned, the 3-4-3, I think having Patterson in there in the middle with Richie Smallwood's really helps, which is strange because last season we didn't necessarily have that. We had Walker and Poynton advanced ahead of Smallwood, but this season it's as though we've been worked out a little bit, and like you say, done tactically against Doncaster, and then obviously having him back in there, just helping Smallwood. But he also has that ability to do both. He can sit a little bit, but he can get forward too, and I think that's really helped me. James has put a comment in here that we're going to sort of miss Patterson over the next 3 games, and you can't help but agree with that, really. I thought Evans played well last night. I would agree that obviously maybe he will be the one that will come in and play with Smallwood going forward, particularly while Patterson's out. But then again, like he says, and like you said, Jess, what do you do with Jamie Walker? Because on his day, Jamie Walker's probably our best player. But yeah, optimistic going forward. I think, personally, we've just got to now... The standards have been set, and obviously the injuries are clearing up. I know we've got a couple of suspensions, but we've got to expect an upturn in performances now, haven't we? That's got to be the standard. What would you think of that? Do you think we really have to see it now the injuries are coming back? So the excuses are running out a little bit, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. You look at the game on Saturday against Swindon, who have had a couple of wins, so maybe not necessarily the right time to play because they looked very much in a mess a couple of weeks ago, but they've obviously had a couple of results. But that's a game at this stage of the season you've got to win at home without doubt and make a bit of a statement to supporters. That you do have some tough fixtures coming up, but I think with everyone fit, that's something that you can go into there, feeling much more confident and upbeat about. And in some ways, some of those games might suit us a little bit better because the expectation level was a little bit different compared to some of the other games recently. So that might help as well. And I think it's a bit about momentum, isn't it, really? With Alexander, it's very streaky, our form. It has been through last year. Some really poor runs of form where we've not won in a long time, then some really good, strong runs. And clearly we need to go on a bit of a run now at this moment just to push ourselves back in there. But there are reasons, I think, with the last 2 performances and with the injury situation easing, that you do think this could be that time to kick on. Really, hopefully. Obviously, losing Patterson for 3 games is a blow, and you just feel with that lad, he just can't get going in the City shirt, can it? Always something seems to happen. Lots of injuries last season, and then this season another injury, and he's just come back and didn't play well at all against Barrow in the league,
No.
but then has played really well in these last 2 games. But then that was a 3-match suspension, and obviously, as you mentioned, Corey Evans would be a good one to bring in there. I think as well, Antonio Sarcevic. Obviously, he's quite close. He was at Edgeley Park on Tuesday, wasn't he? Although he didn't play, he was warming up before they came out properly. I think that position's made for him, to be honest. When at the start of the season with Sarcevic, when he was playing quite as more as a number 10, I wasn't really sure. He was slowing down the play. It didn't really work that well. But I think having him playing in a deeper role alongside Smallwood and then with the license to push forward, that's actually the role he's made for, and that's what he did
Yeah.
at Stockport really, really well. So I think actually it could be a really good timing if Sarcevic is fit to have some involvement very soon. That could help us. Corey Evans as well. I mean, when he signed for us, I worked with a Sunderland fan, and he said, what a coup that is! It's a brilliant signing. He'll be the best player in the league as soon as he's fit. The only reason he left Sunderland was because of injury and fitness concerns. But if he gets going, he'd be amazing at this level. And I think we saw glimpses of that last night. So that bodes well as well. And I think you start to look at each part of the team now and think there's competition for places again. Who do you play at the back? Actually, we've got people on the bench who are really good. Who do we play up front on the threes we just talked about, and then central midfield? Even with Patterson out, assuming Sarcevic is fit, you've got options there as well. So that really does bode well, because we've obviously had a period where it's been really thin bare the squad.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. You've kind of led me on to my next question, really. Just I know Graham Alexander's said over the last since Saturday and again last night, that he thinks that when we're at 90% capacity, we're a match for anybody in the division. Do you agree with that? Do you think when everyone's available that this team's good enough to fulfill our expectations this season?
I do actually, and I know it's not been great recently, and it has been disappointment, and there's obviously been quite a strong supporter reaction, and a lot of negativity has resurfaced, which I think is very understandable. And I'm sure we'll come on to talk about that shortly. But I do think, I go back to the start of the season, I think this is a strong squad. I think that we've got some good options, and sometimes you look at the bench and who's not even able to get into the team, and even the matchday squad as well. Last couple of home games, I've been fortunate to be able to sit in one of the sweet areas when you see some of the injured players and people who are not involved in the match day, and you think, crikey, a couple of years ago we didn't, they'd be in the team without a doubt, and now suddenly they're struggling to get in. And I think that's the measure of progress really as well. So I do think it's a strong squad. I do think obviously we've had some problems with not just with fitness, but in terms of form of people like Kavanagh, that's been a problem, an unexpected problem. But they're assuming getting the 2 goals last night, he can kick on. Bobby Poynton's playing well. Jim Walker's coming back to form a little bit now as well, having had a slight dip. Obviously, Andy Cook's been brilliant, and the defensive options. I think there are reasons to be optimistic. A really testing period coming, but probably we're getting there. We're going into it in a stronger shape, which is encouraging. So let's see what we do.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I was actually asked on the podcast either last week or the week before, where are Bradford City fans on the toxicity scale? Because it's kind of like we all expect it to come at some point, especially when we're not winning games. And you mentioned it before. I think you hit the nail on the head with form has been streaky under Alexander. And I was kind of hoping that we'd avoid that this season. We were very much Jekyll and Hyde work with last year. We'd go on a run where we wouldn't win for ages, and then we'd go on a run where we wouldn't lose for ages. And I was hoping that we'd avoid that this year, but unfortunately, we seem to be in one at the moment. And I think obviously we got a better performance on Saturday. We won last night in what used to be the Bristol Street Motors. I know it's not called that anymore. And then obviously we just need to get that win in the league now, and hopefully that'll come on Saturday against Swindon. But you say that, and how Bradford City struggle against teams that are down at the bottom, and as you rightly say, they've won the last 2 games, and then we've got some tough games after that. But you would hope that the tough run brings the best out in Bradford City, like it sometimes does. We've got Notts County, Port Vale, Chesterfield, haven't we, over Christmas? Yeah, and hopefully we'll see exactly where we are after that, because I don't know if you agree, Jace, but the only way you put a sock in any toxicity is to win games and have better performances. And I know we're very short. We are very short. Or Bradford City fans can be very short of patience at times, but that is literally the only way you do it for me. And hopefully, like I say, it'll come over Christmas, because that gap to the playoffs has got a bit bigger now. Never mind the gap to the autos. So if we want to still be in it, we've got to start picking up results. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you're right that we have got short patience, but I think also we've got quite a lot of patience, really, because it's not just about the fact we've not won a few games and we've drifted down the league a little bit and a few disappointing results. It is the fact that it's been 8 years now of disappointment and frustration and let down, and season after season of things not going to plan, that has just built up and built up. And I think that one thing that we have got a lot of experience for the Bradford City sports at the moment is signs of things going wrong, and
That's
you
true.
started to see a few signs of that. You start to see a repeat of it, and that's where the worry comes, because it's not just that, oh, we've lost a couple of games. It's that we've been in this situation before, and a couple of losing games in November, a bet starts to doubt about the manager and stuff like that. Very quickly comes into something else, and you can see that path that we're starting to go down, and that is the worry. I think it's probably, you go back to the Phil Parkinson days. I mean, Stuart McCall's second spell, to be fair, I think as well. We had that kind of in us where when we would have a setback, we would bounce back very quickly straight away. Not always, but certainly most of the time. And the club just have not had that ability ever since that moment. Really, it's never had that moment where have a really bad defeat and the world's going to end. Then they turn around next game and win really well, and just relay those doubts. That grit and hasn't been at the club for quite a while, and that's a problem, because I don't think we'll ever be successful until we have that. And the worry with Graham Alexander is that he's not shown signs of that so far. In 12 months, I can't remember about I wrote about it a few weeks ago. I don't think there's been a single league defeat under his reign where we've then gone and won the next game. It's
Right.
all it's always been full of another defeat or a draw, and winless run turns into 4, 5, 6 games, rather than we've lost one and we immediately bounce back the week after, and you go again. That's the concern, but that just invites that toxicity, because straight away you're thinking, here we go again. And I think we have been quite patient, to be fair, over this period, but those old wounds are still right at the surface, and it's a challenge for the players in the modern day to deal with. It's not their legacy. It's not Bobby Pointer's fault that we threw away 2017. It's not Jamie Walker's fault that we were rubbish in 2020, but they have to deal with it. They have to sort of carry that on them, and they have to be able to cope with that kind of pressure. And we need players that can do that. And as long as we don't have players that can do that, and hopefully we do now, I think we'll always continue to struggle, because they've got to be able to handle that pressure that comes with it.
I think you're right. We see the signs coming. It's like I noticed a change when we conceded that goal to Colchester in the 100th minute. That seemed to be a big turning point for City fans, and it was almost like you said. It was, oh, here we go again. It's happening again. And then obviously we followed that up with the defeat at Morecambe, who were bottom of the league. I know we had a little gap in between, but you do get the impression sometimes that, yeah, you just worried that you see the signs coming and you worry it's going to come and happen all over again. As you said, Graham Alexander's not been great at bouncing back from results. We talked about it before, going streaky winning runs or streaky non-winning runs. I had hoped at the start of the season that there was a little bit more patience. It just felt like there might be a little bit more patience around him. And I've been quite vocal on the round table pods that we do on here, saying that we've just got to try something different for once, and rather than just first action is to let's go sack the manager. I was hoping that we'd do something like give him 2 years to succeed, rather than expecting the manager to succeed in 1 year, because we've not tried that before. Let's try it. Let's try something different. Where do you stand on Alexander, Jace? Are you still pro Alexander, or are you edging a little bit the other way now?
I'm pro Alexander. I think that he's walked into a very difficult situation a year ago, and he's done a lot of things that have been very good over that period. Some things not so good, but definitely he's coming with a plan, and he's got shown his real capability of what he can do. And while the football's not always great and can be a little bit tedious to watch at times, and when it's bad, it is really bad. I think also you can see real positivity about what he's trying to do, and there's an attack minded to it, and he will take risks, and I think he talks in a really good way. He's got a bit of statesman like Phil Parkinson about him. So I think for me, I want to give him that patience and time to succeed. He's not a perfect manager. There's things that he's done that I disagree with, and decisions he's made that I'm be scratching your head at times. That's definitely for sure. I don't think any Bradford City fan would sit here going, he's the greatest manager of all time or anything like that. He's we can see his flaws, I think, but I'm like you. I believe we need to stick with a manager and we need to just give him that chance and to go through the downturns and to go through the difficult moments, coming out the other side of it, keeping a plan intact and sticking with that plan rather than what we've been doing for the last few years, which has been changing the manager every time and having that kind of repeated failure and cycle of changing something and going a different approach and then changing it again 12 months later. We need to stick to a plan, and I think with Alexander, that's a plan I've got confidence to stick with. I would also be concerned if we end up in a situation this season where we do change managers. I don't have any confidence in the people at the football club to make a good change at that point and to be able to bring in someone better because they haven't done before that. Every time it's not worked out changing managers. So trusting the same people to do that again, I'm just not really comfortable with at all, especially after last year when it took such a long drawn out saga to get Alexander in the first place.
Yeah.
So for me, yeah, I think it's about sticking with him and seeing how we go. Not in the best position, but we're not in a terrible position either. We're certainly out of it. And last season we came from nowhere and almost got into the playoffs. So I think we do need just to keep that faith there. So yeah, I'm with you on that, Gaz, definitely.
Yeah, the style of play is a funny one, isn't it? Because people weren't happy with the Mark Hughes style of play. And I'll be honest with you, Jace, it used to bore me to tears, the Mark Hughes style of play, just knocking it around at the back, not getting anywhere. I often said on the podcast, I'm not so much care whether we're a direct side or whether we're a tick-attacker side. What I want to see is intensity and chances on goal. And that's what gets the crowd off the feet. And that's what gets people interested and coming back to watch City and wanting to go. And I don't really care whether you do that by going long or by knocking it around at the back, but you've got to be creating chances on goal. And like I said, that if you can do that with Graham Alexander being a bit more direct or with a Pep Guardiola style of knocking it about, then whatever is the case, we thrive off intensity at City, don't we? And getting that in the crowd. I remember how rocking it used to get under Parkinson, and he wasn't the most tactile of managers. It was get it forward, but you knew if we were attacking that cop in the second half, we were having a bloody good go, didn't you? And I just think that we could see that again at some point. It's been interesting that these last couple, Saturday really, and again last night we were a little bit less direct. I thought we were knocking it about a little bit more, and that sort of puzzles me as to why we always go so direct. Is it just that that's the easy way out sometimes, that we know we've got Cook up there and we can hit him with the long ball? I think when we mix it up, we look like we're at our best and we try a little bit of both, and I'd like to see a little bit more of that. But yeah, that's just my opinion. We talked about, you said again, you touched on it there, like the manager, the people that would appoint the manager. And I noticed there was a couple of articles on with the Post over the last week where one was called "When Is Enough Enough," and another one was talking about how the setup behind the scenes at Bradford is different to how it might be set up at, like I think they mentioned Lincoln and Stockport and a couple of other teams. Do you think that might be another reason to stick with a manager and try something a little bit different? Because maybe are we not 100% set up behind the scenes with all these expert directors on the board that other clubs have? We're not set up for quick success, are we? Maybe something that a little bit slower, a little bit more, take a couple of years rather than one. Do you think that's something that we could do? Like I say, are we not set up behind the scenes, Jace? That was a little bit worrying, that article, because I didn't realise that.
Yeah, the article that written by Leon, I received it and I was really proud to publish that, to be honest, because to me it felt like it was looking at it from a very different angle, from an angle I'd not really thought about, and I think a lot of hadn't thought about, and it's kind of added to the debate, I think, and I think it was a good, positive, influential thing on that. And it wasn't, obviously it's critical of the football club, but Leon certainly wasn't going in two-footed and having a go at people like that. If anything, it was pointing out why actually it's really difficult for Ryan Sparks to succeed, actually, and because of the environment. So yeah, I thought it was a really good kind of a contribution to the debate, really, and I think it was welcomed, and it does illustrate the impact there, because we are lacking that behind the scenes. I think you go back to the Derek Adams comments of a year ago when he talked about Bradford City being a big club in League Two, but off the field being one of the smallest clubs, and obviously the club at the time, or Ryan Sparks in particular, tried to be dismissive of that comment and and be disparaging towards Derek Adams towards it, but he hit the nail on the head, and he's absolutely right. And there's a lot I don't agree with Derek Adams on, but certainly I think for that point he's making, I think that's really, really important, and it is the problem now. We do have an issue, I think, at the moment where, for me personally speaking, over the last 15 months, I would say, I've lost confidence in the ability of this football club to go forward in the way it is in terms of the sustainable model we've been trying to do, in terms of the off the field setup that we have and the level of expertise we have outside the manager. I just think that the going backwards since the playoff fight, the semi final defeat to Carlisle, the club has got a lot of things wrong. And when things have gone against them and there's been some turbulence, they've not handled it very well. And I think that's down to weaknesses in infrastructure off the field and the lack of people there and support that's going on there. That I think now, even now, still lingers on now, and it's been part of the recent kind of resurfacing of the frustration people have had. It's just that, is this club set up to succeed the way it is? Can it be successful with that approach and what they've been trying to do? And I think the hope was with the open letter from Stephen Rupp last March, and he vowed to do things differently, invest in the football club, and to do change was, you could give him the benefit of the doubt at that point and say, well, okay, if you do things differently, actually that's good and that could be successful, because he's a rich guy, Stephen Rupp reportedly. He's got a lot of money behind him, probably the richest owner we've ever had, very capable of kind of investing, putting that success in there. And if he's willing to do that, then I think everyone of the supporters can be behind him. But the problem we've had is that, X amount of months on, there's little evidence that things have really changed. We've obviously got David Sharp come in, and I think that's a welcome addition, and he obviously knows a lot about what he's doing, and that's there to support people like Ryan Sparks, which is really good, and I'm sure is massively appreciated behind the scenes. But it still doesn't feel like we've pushed the needle enough, and they're still set up to success. And at times like this, when it's not been great, and when there's been a few things off the field that have not been brilliant, you're still reminded of that kind of lack of, for me personally, like I say, confidence in the ability of the football club to be successful. So because of that, you do come back to people like Graham Alexander and think, yeah, it's not been perfect, it's not gone 100% to plan so far, but that is not where the faults of the club lie right now. I don't think. I think it's some of the things around it, and we need to keep people like Alexander, who's a football expert and who has had success before. We need to keep them in. We're doing what they're doing and doing everything we can to support them. And that should be the questions right now for everyone at the football club, to Graham Alexander, especially with the recent bad run, is to say, what can we do, Graham, to help you be successful? What do you need to do that, whether it's January or other things, to make sure to give them the best possible chance? That's what I'd be looking to do. What's your view?
Yeah, I think, again, one of the first points you made there where you were talking was that article's not necessarily a slight on Ryan Sparks or anybody that's at the club at the moment. It's saying how threadbare we are behind the scenes, and it's got to a stage at times where I think we talked about it before, like the manager has been the only football expert there, and everything therefore has come back on the manager. Hopefully bringing David Sharp in will make a difference to that. Obviously he's been here a while now, but he spoke when he first came in about how many windows it might take to get the team how he wanted it to be. That again is showing me that he knows that it's not going to happen overnight. And I would like to think as well that having David Sharp there, he stuck with Nigel Clough for a long time at Mansfield when they were in probably similar situation to where we are now, and probably even worse off. And I remember them coming to Bradford City 2 or 3 years ago when Clough was manager, and they got beat. And I went on Twitter and interacted with some of their fans afterwards, and they wanted Clough gone. They'd just had enough. They wanted him out, and obviously David Sharp didn't do that. He stuck by him, and it's paid off in the end. I know he's been there. I think it was 2020 he came in, but he's been there 4 or 5 years now, 3 or 4 years now, and it's really paid off. They look really good last season. He's got them playing. He's got them probably punching above the weight in League One now as well. So hopefully it's a sign of things to come here, and we can just have that little bit of patience and stick with the manager, like I say, and realise that it's not necessarily all set up behind the scenes for immediate success. And I think asking Graham Alexander, like you said, what he needs behind the scenes, what is lacking here, what can we do for you? Maybe January is part of that, but it isn't the whole of that. What else can we do behind the scenes to get us going in the direction that we need to be going in? You mentioned Stephen Rupp's letter there, and it's a really, really sort of interesting thing to discuss, because I think there was a bit of toxicity against the club when he brought, a lot of toxicity against the club when he initially wrote that letter back in the early part of this year, and the protests were going on and things. And I think it probably bought him and the club a little bit of time in the promises that he made. And then he's done another one about a fortnight ago, hasn't he? And to me, that met a little bit of ridicule among City fans just because he was talking about the investment in the pitch and the club shop roof and things like that, and it wasn't necessarily at the time what City fans wanted to hear because we were in a bad run of form. Do you think that Stefan Rupp letter? I know you've spoken about before, Jess, about how we need more communication from the club, and obviously that is part of that, and we've got that, and we've got what we wanted in that respect. Do you like what you heard from Stefan Rupp in that letter? And do you think it's just a case that it was poorly timed because we were in a bad run and that was why it was received like it was by a group of supporters?
Yeah, I think I've written an article about this the other week, and I think for me, the contents of what he said was fine. There was nothing in there that I had a problem with, and it was a decent update. Yeah, I know there's been a lot of ridicule about the fact that we talked about the renovating the club shop roof, but I think that's fair enough to talk about to us. I didn't really see the problem with that to us. It's a fair update to give. I think the problem for me has been the lack of communications between that letter there and the open letter in March. And one of the things that I thought would be different, and it's something I highlighted in the article because he promised it in the open letter himself, Stefan Rupp, he would be more visible to supporters. He would communicate more to us and talk about the things that we want to hear about and do those things. And to me, that should have been a reset in March to have like a consistent communication approach, to be talking to us on a regular basis, maybe like a monthly update, something like that to say, this is what's happened this month in the club, these are the key things, this is what's coming up, and give that kind of update. And if you have a consistent communication strategy in good times and bad times, then that's more credible and that buys you more support in those difficult moments. I think the fact that basically we've heard nothing really, and I know he came to a supporters forum in the summer and he spoke to the local media at that point then, so there was something there, but that was in the middle of the Euros when most of us, I certainly wasn't particularly in tune with Brexit issues at that point. I was more about what's going on with the football basically. But there's been nothing apart from that until that moment when we had a few bad results and then he releases it then. And I think because of that, it hasn't been received very well. The timing looks poor and it looks reactive rather than a consistent strategy. And if for me, the point of that is why take so long to do it? Why not? Why were you doing that months ago? And if you've done it on a regular basis, then I don't think anyone would have batted an eyelid with that update last week. I think it just would have been good. It's good to hear, and you feel more confident in the football club because that was a big thing for me. You know, like I say, I lost personally confidence in the club last season. Other people lost confidence years ago. I think that's fair to say. Other people still have confidence, and that's fair enough as well. We're all in different places on this as supporters. But I wanted to have reasons to feel more confident from March onwards in terms of what the club was doing differently. That the fact they had listened, that they're reacting that, and they are going to do these things a different way, invest more money into the club, into success, and all those things. And we've not heard anything about those things. We've not heard anything different, and it just feels like the same club doing the same things. Nothing has really changed fundamentally.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I was expecting it to be more, like you say, monthly, even if it's just like a monthly newsletter that comes out to season ticket holders or gets published in the programme, or I don't think we have a match day programme anymore, do we? But you know what I mean? Something that's on a regular basis in both good times and bad, because I think that was part of the reason it was met with a little bit of derision by some supporters, because it felt like, oh, we're struggling, here's another letter. If it had been more, like you say, on a monthly basis, it wouldn't have met that had that kind of reaction. The one thing that I was a little bit disappointed with, because I had hoped that we'd have heard something sooner, is that the buying back of Valley Parade. I know that the initial comments about buying back Valley Parade that Stefan made back in the summer were sort of timed along with when he had that fans forum. And since then, it's all gone a little bit quiet. And I think it would have been good to hear a little bit more of that. I think his only comment on it was, we aren't where I'd like to be, or we're not quite where I'd like to be on that. I'd like to know a little bit more about that. And maybe if we were getting something monthly, we might know, when we might hear something about that. Whereas now it's a little bit like, when are we next going to hear anything? When are we going to hear anything about Valley Parade or anything from Stefan Rupp? The fact that he's coming to games is good. I think he's been a few times this season. He's scheduled to come again soon. I mean, Ian's put a comment in here. Can Ryan Sparks continue to not communicate with fans? Surely the CEO should be the public face of the club on and off the field. Is that something you'd agree with, Jace? Should Ryan Sparks be speaking out more than he is? Or is it now that book been passed to Stefan Rupp? And if so, why has it been passed to Stefan Rupp?
I think there's room for both to be speaking, and I'd include David Schapp. And that, although David Schapp has, to be fair, done a few interviews this season, so he's probably been more vocal. But yeah, I think there is. The thing is with Bradford City supporters is that we love our football club, we care passionately, and it's something that's on our minds and consumes us all the times. And there's a lot of things we wonder and debate and all those things as fans. We want to hear more about what the club's doing, what the club's thinking, and what's going on at the football club, and be more open and transparent with those communications. I think is needed. I think that it's been difficult for Ryan, hasn't it? And he's a young lad, and it's his first job as CEO, and he's out in a very public environment doing that. And has he made mistakes? Yeah, absolutely. But anyone would in that situation.
Of course,
if we were doing that, we would make mistakes as well. Absolutely, there shouldn't be something wrong with that. But I think there's almost, he was very vocal at first, made a lot of public statements, did a lot of stuff. I interviewed a few times. I spoke to him a lot of times over that period. And he was always very open and wanting to really communicate and be transparent. And somewhere that's been lost. And now we have the complete polar opposite, basically, where we don't hear or see anything from him, and we don't know what's going on from those side of things. And it's a real contrast to the real sea change. And I don't know what those reasons are. I suspect probably that he's not been happy with some of the action he's got, and has probably felt a bit, that some of the criticism has been unfair, which I can totally understand as well why he would feel those things. But
yeah.
I think sometimes it feels like the football club, and I don't just mean Ryan by that. The football club in generally can almost be too worried and too scared by what a few people on Twitter think, and how a few people can put some angry comments on there. And you've got to remember that you've got 15,000 season ticket holders plus other thousands of people who care deeply about the football club and want to know what's going on. And it should be about that bigger picture, that wider audience, and what everyone else thinks, rather than just what some of the loudest people happen to think.
Yeah.
And I think that's been a bit lost, really, and that needs to be thought back a little bit more to me, really, because I would find, I think any of us would find it very difficult to be CEO of Bradford City and be on Twitter and see all that stuff. Wherever you are, you're going to get criticised. There's a reason why people like Graham Alexander, I'm sure, does not go near Twitter, because you need to protect his sanity. That's fine, but you still need to communicate with people and say what's going on, and not worry too much about that kind of side of things. For me, I mean, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I didn't used to buy a program before. I stopped years ago. But you used to get in the program, you'd get like thoughts from the chairman or thoughts from the CEO, wouldn't you? And even if it's just something like that, where he answered the odd question here and there every other week or whatever, and just was, like you say, a little bit more visible, I think that would help. It's an incredibly tough job, because we've talked about how the board there's not a lot of support there in terms of directors, and so Leon wrote that article for the Post about it. So I understand why he's probably done what he's done, but there is an element that you can't just. We've talked about this before when we've been to away games, haven't we, Jess? That when fans turn on the manager, it's like, we're going to sack him. It's like, well, fans don't always know. The vocal ones aren't always the ones that are right, and there are 15,000 fans at games, and maybe you just need to be a bit more patient. Not necessarily patient, but communicate on all levels with people, and not just, like you say, on Twitter and react to what's going on the hashtag. Obviously, the Stefan Rupp's latest letter that we spoke about a few minutes ago, he's talked about investing in the squad in January. He also talked about that last summer and at the fans forum. And I think there probably was investment in the squad last summer. We obviously paid a fee for Tyreek Wright, and we gave new contracts to Brad Halliday and Bobby Poynton. So there was investment to a certain extent. Do you expect to see, or do you want to see more of that in January? What are you hoping to get out of the January transfer window in terms of incomings and outgoings, Jace?
Yeah, I think, again, it probably was again something that kind of set him back a little bit in terms of support mood, was when we suddenly started early November, started talking about January quite a lot and being like, oh, we've got a plan and we're all ready to go. And you just think, how many times we've done that over the years? We've talked about that at that stage of season, and why should we be thinking about in that situation where we have to get to January to fix things? And that's the magic bullet, because it hasn't been enough in the past. So I think Graham Alexander after the what game was it where he kind of came out and said he doesn't want
Can't
to hear
remember which one, but he disagreed with. He basically said he didn't want to talk about it, which was interesting, wasn't it? Because David Sharp had just done an interview about it.
Yeah, and I thought that was spot on, to be fair, because the idea was sitting here in November or December as we are now, obviously, and we're going, oh, it'll be fine when we get to January, but it doesn't always work like that, and often January signs don't arrive till the end of the month anyway. So there's still so much football to be played that we can't be, having everything on that really. So, I think obviously we need to look at strengthening certain areas. I think you look at the left wing back situation. And the idea that we won't be Tarrant right this year as kind of our first choice left wing back when it's a position he played about 5 or 6 times towards the end of last season. He wasn't a specialist there. Was a risk that probably hasn't necessarily worked out. Lewis Richards has come on leaps and bounds. To be fair, he's been very good this season, having shown some promise last season, but being quite raw at times. But I still think you'd look at that and think that's probably an area to have a look at strengthening. And you're probably thinking about up front. But I think probably it goes back to the summer and some of the talk about the investment you mentioned. It feels like we were a bit hamstrung by some of the legacy of the high earners of people like Yvonne Overs of the world who, let's be honest, I think the club wanted to move on in the summer, but could not find buyers for those players, which therefore impacted what we could do in the summer. And I think we're almost in January in a similar situation of what we really could need to do is move on some of these players who are on good wages, who aren't really part of Alexander's plans, and who, to be frank, in Oliver's case, look like they're checked out and ready to leave. Really, they don't look like they've almost given up really on their careers at Bradford City. If we can move them on, and what that could then do in terms of investment, because if you can really focus on a couple of really high quality signings rather than bringing 6 or 7 players in and loans and stuff like that, that's the thing that can make a real difference, like a real game changer of a couple of signings who ordinarily wouldn't get. That's what I'd like to see personally, but I think it will very much depend on what we can do with some of those players. And the other point of that is it goes back to this point, but as with Alexander wanting to keep him and sticking with a plan. For Dane Oliver is probably an example of that, of a signing for an old manager who with Glenn left with, and the plan's very much changed and there's different thought processes going on there. And this is a legacy of changing managers all the time, is it end up with a squad of players who actually you don't necessarily really want. And if you can keep Alexander longer, give him a few more transfer windows, that's absolutely his squad at that point, and that's his plan, and will be better for that really. So, yeah, I think it's one for outgoings as well as ingoings. But what do you reckon?
That's the key for me: changing manager, and then the manager coming in for a year and deciding he doesn't like the players that were signed by the previous manager. I think if you've got consistency in manager, and obviously Stephen Gent, he does get criticised, and I don't know how good Stephen Gent is at his job. I don't know how restricted he is and how he interacts with David Sharp and Graham Alexander. But if you've got a bit of consistency there, you're not going to be writing signings off as regularly as we seem to do at the moment. I think Verdane Oliver's obviously the one that everyone talks about because he's rumoured to be on a large salary, and that salary is probably not akin to being Andy Cook's understudy, which is basically what he is now. You'd want somebody on a smaller salary if they're going to be understudy striker. For me, you'd be looking to move him on and bring someone in cheaper, and particularly someone like Tyler Smith, who's never really hit the ground running at City. I would imagine that he's not on a small wage either. You can move those two out and maybe bring in one really good partner for Andy Cook or something like that. That would be something that I'd be looking to do. We do need help. He obviously needs help up front. Hopefully, Callum Kavanagh's turned the corner now with the last couple of performances. But you might even look at sending Ollie Sanderson back because he's not the player he was at the start of the season. If you can rejig it up front and, like I say, bring in a top quality replacement for a Oliver and a Smith and a Sanderson, or a cheaper understudy for Cook and a top quality replacement, I'd be looking to do something like that. I think, like you said, quality over quantity is the key. So 2 or 3 out up front and 1 or 2 in up front would be a big thing for me. And then you're right, left wing back. We all had our misgivings about Tarrant right at the start of the season. Obviously, he's injured at the moment, but even before he was injured, I think in fans' minds or in a lot of supporters' minds that I'd spoken to, Lewis Richards had kind of overtaken him in their mind as the starting left wing back. I think he'd been targeted a couple of times. The Doncaster game in particular, I thought they targeted him. Maybe he will come good as a left wing back, but we've also got to remember with Tariq Wright that he can play different positions. I know that we don't play with wingers at the moment, but he has played up front before. maybe that could be something we could look at. I went to the Accrington Stanley away game towards the end of last season, March time. I think he scored twice. He looked really, really good up there with Andy Cook. So that's something that we can possibly look at. But yeah, left wing back and up front, I'd agree with you, Jace. They're the two areas we need to look at. I'd also like to think that we'll keep hold of Huntington and Evans. Evans looks, like you said, and like we talked about before, looks like a really good signing at League Two level. If he can step in for Patterson and play alongside Smallwood, or be Smallwood's understudy like he has been so far, I think that is something that we should be looking to keep him doing. And obviously Huntington's played really well when he's played the last couple of games. If we pick up any injuries at the back, he's going to be probably the one who comes in, particularly in the centre. I wouldn't want to see him on as the left centre back or the right centre back, because I just don't think he'd have the pace for that. But in the middle, as the leader of the back three, I think it is a good option to have. So keeping hold of those two would be good. Diabate seems to have disappeared off the scene completely. I don't think he's made the bench recently, so it'd be interesting to see what happens with him. I don't know if he's injured or whether he's just out of favour. I don't think we've been told that, but it'd be interesting to see whether he stays or goes back. But for me, yeah, keeping hold of those short-term deals and then left wing back and up front would be where I'd be looking at, Jace. If we were to do that, and if we were to keep everyone fit, and if we were to get over these suspensions, is the aim still promotion? Are you confident that we can get in the playoffs this year at the very least?
Yeah, I am still, to be honest. I just come back to the point. I do think it's a strong squad, and you talk about the players, and you just remind yourselves of how much depth there actually is, really, and players who can't get into the team. Obviously, as you've talked about quite rightly, there's some areas we're looking at and strengthening, but there's a good mix of players there, and it comes back to the point I think for all of us this season that we can all see is that this ain't a strong League Two. This is the weakest League Two probably we've seen for a good few years, perhaps since we've been relegated to this level 6 years ago. Port Vale have done well at the top, and we'll see them up close on Boxing Day to see what they're about. But other teams, Walsall doing really well, fair play to them. But there isn't necessarily a real standout teams that you really fear. The fact that Crewe could have gone to the automatic promotion places if they beat us on Saturday, but looked pretty average to me. Just says it all really, and the opportunity is absolutely there. And certainly for us, if we don't finish in the top 7 this season, that is an underachievement without a doubt. And there will clearly have to be serious questions asked. Automatics maybe have gone a little bit too far away from us in terms of the points right now. But again, we talk about the streakiness of Alexander, and if we do go on that kind of run and start to really rack up points, we could be back in that mix quite quickly, I think, really. So, it's there for us to be pushing on for the top 7, absolute minimum, and maybe with the outside chance still of making the top 3. But yeah, anything else than that, it'd just be a massive disappointment, and you would probably fear where do we go from there, really, in terms of if we can't get into the top 7 this season, then how will we ever basically under the current structure? Would you go along with that?
I think it has to be the aim. I think we have, like we talked about at the start, we've been hamstrung by injuries, and obviously we are starting to get players back now, so we should know over the next month with the games over Christmas where we're going to be. But as again you mentioned earlier, we had that run at the end of last season where we looked completely out of it and then ended up missing out by just a point. So it shows you how late in the day it can change. And if you can manage to put a run together, find any little bit of consistency, you always have a chance of getting in that top 7 or 6 or 7 spot. What's interesting is, and I know we said that, and I agree, questions will be asked if we don't make the top 7. But you look at Walsall, who just missed out last year. They've now kept the manager. They've built on what they had, and we talked about that again with the transfer window on keeping a manager and building on what you've got, and how David Sharp spoke about it might take 2 or 3 windows to get the squad where they want it to be. So I don't think it's completely the end of the world. There will obviously be a big reaction if we miss out on the top 7, and we should be aiming for it. And I think I'd be disappointed if we didn't get it. But if we were to miss out by a point or 2 again and go again next year with replacing Everday Oliver and spending that money wisely elsewhere, I don't think it'd be completely the end of the world. But I agree with what you said, that we do have the ability in the squad that would make it a disappointment if we didn't make the top 7 this year. And I thoroughly expect us to be there or thereabouts right up until May and hopefully get in there. And if we can get the players back and performing to the best, there's no reason why we can't do it. Ian Hemmings, what about a deputy for Sam Walker? We'll just finish on that, Jace, before we go. go off the transfer front, do you think we need another deputy for Sam Walker? Should Zach Haddy be given a chance? Should he have been playing last night? Or are you happy that Colin Doyle's still going along merrily at 39-40 as our backup keeper?
It is a worry, to be honest. And when you were talking about January transfer targets, that did flash in my mind really about the goalkeeping situation, because I don't think Sam Walker's quite been as good this season.
No, he hasn't.
It's not been terrible or anything like that, but I think there's a few moments where you've looked at him and gone, you could have done better there. Haven't he's letting a few goals that look preventable. He's still making a few good saves, but not looking quite at that force there. And we obviously had the situation with Harry Lewis last year where he had a really big drop off, certainly bigger than this one, and it becomes a problem, doesn't it? At that point, if you haven't necessarily got a decent backup option there, I think Colin Doyle is fine, but his future as a goalkeeping coach at the end of the day, and I do understand the criticism last night in terms of why are we playing him in that game, instead of giving the young goalkeeper an opportunity there. I think that is a fair point, definitely, because we need to look at those kind of things as well a little bit, and those are the kind of games to play them. So you do wonder if in January that's something that we'd want to have a look at. It almost feels the last few years that we've almost tried to get away with just having one goalkeeper and then just relying on a backup or a lone keeper to be sort of that number two, and never really call upon. And ultimately, it's all about that number one's form, and we live and die by that form. But I think with Sam Walker, as good as signing as he has been, I think he could just probably benefit from a bit of competition, to be honest, and just to see that, because I don't think anyone would argue his performances this season would make him the best goalkeeper in the league or anything like that. So it suggests there's improvement we could potentially get there. So yeah, I would agree with what Ian's saying there. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I mean, Zach Haddy's obviously really highly rated. I think he's been called up to train with England youth teams a few times. Sort of player we probably should be giving a chance in what used to be the Bristol Street Motors Trophy. And if he's not up to it, then right now, then look at getting an understudy or even someone who can compete strongly with Sam Walker into the building. Because, like you say, he has made one or two mistakes that he probably wouldn't have made last season. Interesting that you mentioned Harry Lewis there, because I think he's been dropped now at Carlisle. He's only on the bench at Carlisle these days, so his career has really taken a tumble. But I think what I get from what you're saying and what I certainly think is the squad is a strong squad at the moment. It probably does need tweaking in one or two areas, but we can thoroughly hope to get in that top seven, realistically hope to get in that top seven this season. And if we don't do it this season, I think we will do it next season with a few more tweaks, with 2 or 3 more windows, as David Sharp said. I think we're on the right tracks. Maybe we need a bit of help behind the scenes, like Sharp and has come in to help Ryan Sparks. And as Leon's article said, the squad is the directorship is shallow behind the scenes. We need some more help probably on the board, but we're heading in the right direction, I think, at the moment. Would you agree? Can we wrap it up there, Jay?
Yeah, absolutely. Bang on. Can't argue with anything you said there.
Right. I think we'll leave it there for tonight then. Thanks for joining me, Jason. Pleasure as always to chat through Bradford City with you. Onwards and upwards with the West Yorkshire Football Show. Please like and subscribe if you can. Please retweet if you can. And we'll see you again soon on the West Yorkshire Football Show. Thanks for joining us.